Welcome back. This is episode 5 of our season 5, Engaging Culture. What?
5 and
That's
5.
Right. 5 and 5. Special. I don't have a candle or anything to celebrate.
Right.
But if you haven't listened to episode 3,
Yeah.
go back. That's part 1 of a conversation we've had with Brannon Shortt, pastor, rapper, awesome background in all things engaging culture. So you got to hear his story.
Yeah, who knows?
He's all things to all people, like the Bible says we should be. Indeed. Praise Jesus. And then we're also joined by Devin. So Devin, tell us a little. Oh,
What up, everybody?
never before been done in the podcast studio, but I'm very appreciative.
To me. Yeah, not a surprise.
You, Dina, did not produce that sound. Yes, indeed. I've clapped for people before.
Yes.
But okay, Devin, tell us where you're interning and give us a little bit, just a snippet of your background.
Okay, so I'm interning at the one and only Granite Bay High School Ministry.
Way to plug it.
Yes. What was the second part?
Just a little taste of your background.
A little taste of my background. I was born in Tacoma, Washington, in a military base. Then grew up most of my life in Mountain View, California. I grew up around the church. Like I wasn't really like going to all these youth groups and everything, but my dad was really like a legacy faith type thing. Like he taught me everything I know about Jesus and it led me to the Lord. So,
I love it.
Cool.
One of my favorite messages I've received from a Thrive College student this year was from Devin, to brag on you. And you said, can I miss church because I want to throw this party for my boys to watch the Niners game? So this was like back in the season, pre-Super Bowl, and the Niners were going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
we were hoping they were going to go.
If they won, they're
yeah,
going to go
okay.
to the Super Bowl.
It was a high stakes game.
Yeah.
Tina
Right.
knows lots about
Everything
sports.
on the line.
It was for
Everything on the
ministry.
line.
Yeah, I hate the Niners, but I was hoping they were going to win because all my boys loved them, so it meant more parties.
Oh, that is true ministry
All
right
things
there.
to all people.
That's right, right
He
here.
even used the word hate.
Yes.
I love it.
And so I was like, all right. Yeah. First of all, yes, definitely. I knew you were going to catch a different service.
Yes.
And so I was like, you can definitely do this, but what a heart to use something that you're just like, man, what does this have to do with Jesus? You know what it has to do with Jesus is you're doing a Jesus thing of getting a group of people together.
Yeah, man.
That is a very Jesus thing. So just to brag on
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So we're continuing this conversation, and there's been just lots of little questions that come up on the right way to engage culture and maybe some bad ways to engage culture. So, and turn it over you to Devin, to you, the Devin.
You,
to
the Devin.
You, the Devin.
The Devin. What's your next
first-
thoughts?
Yeah. What's your next question?
I love like what you were talking about. What it really boiled down to was relationship. So can you expand more on the importance of relationship, of having a relationship with people who aren't believers?
Yeah. My wife uses this. Clinical psychologist, works with kids who've experienced trauma. Literally the most special person I've ever met in my life. Sits in people's pain. Nobody's perfect, but compassion, kindness, redemptive, like emotionally healthy, corrective, like incredible human being. But she has this line that is so simple. At first, I wasn't even sure what to do with it. And she goes, relationships are the meaning of life. I just pause. And she's like, oh, no, I mean that on every level. From your relationship to God, your relationship in delighting in Him as He delights in you, your relationship with yourself, and what that then creates, that truth, as David said, would reign in your innermost, and how that should then pour to relationships, not only to others, but to the world and the things you're involved with all around you. That relationship is the meaning of life. So for me, you have to have boundaries. You have to be emotionally healthy, corrective. Like you want to be somebody that can hold boundaries and also hold space. But for me, I've adopted that line as my own. I just had to give her the credit because it's hers. I do believe relationships are the meaning of life. And I do think that our relationships I look around Jesus's table and I'm shocked. And I actually think like if we were going to have a real like deep theological conversation one day about why there's a zealot and a tax collector at that table, it actually, the reality of it makes me uncomfortable given what it meant at the time. It bothers me at some level how willing Jesus is to have all these people from these different places and backgrounds at his table. So I think I had a mentor speak over me one time and say, here is my prayer for you. They call you what they called Jesus. And I was like, Blasphemy? What, son
Lord?
of God? What do you want them to call me? And he looks at me, he goes, I just hope they call you friend of sinners. And I think that really stuck with me, that like it is important to have people in your inner circle around you that love God and are so connected and would intercede on your behalf even if you weren't sure how to anymore, to push you in the direction of righteousness, that would hold you in love and all of that. And it's important that, like, I think that our table looks a lot like Jesus' table looked. Who is this man that eats with sinners, this, and that? Why would he do these things? And then him continually saying that the kingdom is coming near. Like, the kingdom has come. Like, Jesus, like this embodied way in Jesus, I think we should embody ourselves. So I just find it really important that relationships, from the ultimate to the right now, are kind of the meaning of life. And then we see these tables that look so different in the New Testament. Then I try to hold that outside of emotionally needing to lay lines down or boundaries down and toxic, abusive, like all those different things, that I tend to just hold the open-handed posture that anybody can be at my table if anybody could be at his.
Wow.
That's good. That's awesome.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's my outlook.
How would you handle criticism from religious people? Because I feel like this is going to happen. It happened to Jesus.
Oh, and it's never happened to me.
Never happened to you. I specifically remember, Brandon, I had to call you into my office. That sounds weird, but like you were teaching New Testament theology,
Yes.
Our New Testament class, and
Yes.
I got an email from a parent
Right.
about something that one of our students thought they heard you say.
Right.
And so I was just like, well, that doesn't sound like Brandon. I'm going to have to follow up.
Yeah.
And so through the course of that conversation, I was just like, man, this is what it feels like to be misunderstood. Because
Sure.
as I asked you the question, did you say this? Do you believe that?
Right.
Do you mean this? Your eyes went wide and you're like, I'm pretty sure I've said the exact opposite
Right.
and been very clear.
No, I didn't say that. Yes, I do believe this.
Yes, exactly.
I was just
And-
posing another question.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
How do you deal with being misunderstood by
Yeah.
Christians and
Yeah.
receiving criticism from people that apparently love the same Jesus as you, but are going about that in a wildly different way?
Honestly, I think a part of my own transformation and sanctification process that I am not there yet on is I tend, I'm trying to do better at not swinging that pendulum. I remember being in the middle of 2020 and feeling, I ended up writing a song that made the record called People Mad. And there was this line I wrote and I said, I've got people mad that I'm all the things they didn't want me to be. And I've got others mad that I'm all the things that they didn't think I could be. And I'm saying too much of this. He's too pastor. He's too rapper. He's a little too street. He's a little too church. He's a little too this. And like caring a lot. I mean, I would be lying. I'm a 20-0 Myers-Briggs extrovert. I can go talk to inanimate objects. I love people. And I'd be lying. I want you to love me. I do. Like, not to the point that it is forming my identity. I'm holding that. But I do. I want you to love me. So holding this tension of caring a lot or trying not to swing the pendulum so far to be like, I don't care at all what you think. There are moments that I do not care at all. Like, I love we have a person in our life that often says, be slow to take criticism from somebody you wouldn't take advice from. So I've gotten a lot better at that over the years, but I do want to hold this place. Like, I think that I also hold the value that criticism is always good. I know that sounds nuts, but like, here's why I'm saying my middle ground is this, that if I got criticized and I took the humble approach to assess whether that person was right, say they were, then I can grow. And I heard it, and I took it. And say I completely disagree with them, I may become even stronger in the conviction I held when I said what I said. So I try to hold that, like, all criticism should be dealt with and sat on for a little bit and, like, processed. Even if that little bit's 2 seconds. Like, there's some criticism I'm like, oh, Lord. And then there's some criticism I'm like, oh, man, that makes me really mad. And I'm offended, and my feelings are hurt, and they might be right.
Yeah.
So I try to hold all criticism. But if somebody shoots one at me when it comes to culture,
Yeah.
I do understand that, like, there is, me and you, like, I've read an author who said one thing we do know about some of, like, especially the stories we see in the Old Testament, is that misunderstanding is a part of the road. So I do think that there's a unique, I say this gently, like I think there's a unique space for certain callings that are probably going to mean that there's some misunderstanding the whole road home.
Yeah.
And I do think I probably have a little bit of that. So I just want to handle it with humility and respond in a way that would hopefully actually build trust, even if the other person disagreed with me.
That's really good. I think I have like a thimbleful of criticism in my life. So, but even the thimbleful has been like, it's too much, Lord. I cannot bear it.
Yeah.
I think with that, I cannot bear this cross.
I need
Please
tea
take
and
it from me.
crumpets.
Yeah, seriously, I need to watch the Great British Baking Show. It's all I can handle right now.
Somebody turn on Downton Abbey.
Yes, please. And so one of the things I often do is when I feel really criticized is I just ask God to clarify, what's supposed to be my role
Yeah.
in this person's life.
Yeah.
And what is my role in this conversation?
Yeah.
You bring up, everything that happened post-COVID and just a lot that was happening in our country and the tensions of racism. And
Yeah.
I asked God a lot of questions in that season. And I remember, man, it just feels like I'm getting criticized on this side, getting criticized on this side. I'm barely doing anything. That's part of the criticism. And so I just remember going to God and saying, hey, what is my role? What do you want my voice to be in this conversation? And I felt like those were two clarifying questions because like you're saying, some people have a call in this world. Some people are called to politics. And just because some people are called to politics and they're called to be very clear on political positions doesn't mean you have that calling. And doesn't mean that that's your
Praise
lane
God.
that you're supposed to run
Yes.
in, right?
Right.
And I had this conversation with my sister, and we have actually very similar political views, but very different stances on how we would go about communicating those. I was like, hey, part of my call as a human is I feel called to be a peacemaker.
Yes.
And so I recognize that some people culturally are called to be disruptors.
Yeah.
I'm called to be a peacemaker. And so I avoid saying things that would cause too much disruption. And that itself is disruptive and I get criticized for it. But
Sure.
I'm going to just try to stay faithful. And I think that's been a comforting thing to me along with what you're saying is just saying, I'm just going to stick to what I know that God has called me to do.
Yeah.
You mentioned, like you just want to be faithful in part to the calling that God has on your life, which I love that.
Yeah. And not overstep that space. Like, I think you nailed it. Like, I think there are opinions I possess that I will never share.
Yeah.
And I think that that's birthed in some wisdom that are, and then there's stuff that we do. And yeah, I just want to, I was saying this off camera. I want to be faithful to God, faithful to his word, and then faithful to who he called me to be.
Yeah.
As he gave us, David, the purpose of God in our generation.
Yeah.
I just want to be faithful to those three things in that order.
And there's literally biblical precedent for what Brandon and I are saying. You think about the big division between Paul and Barnabas in the book of Acts. And so you look at that and you can go read the chapter, but it's basically Barnabas wants to take this person who's strayed on this missionary venture. And Paul's like, heck no, he walked away from Jesus. He can't be trusted right now. Only the super faithful are going.
Yeah.
And then Barnabas is like, oh, you, Paul, want to set the standards for someone's
Super
past
faithful?
and
Yeah.
how we should judge them.
Right.
And so it's this great conversation. But when I look at it, I mean, it's a difference of calling.
Yeah.
Barnabas is called to be the son of encouragement. Paul was called to go and bring some clarity to the gospel. And so
That's well said.
based on their different callings, they had this divide, but sometimes a divide in what it looks like to carry out the mission is actually okay. And so
Yeah.
you might be criticized by someone that has the same Bible as you, but might have a little bit different mission from Jesus. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
That's good.
Yeah. There's enough room for us.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's enough room at specifically Jesus' table.
100%.
Very good.
No
All right,
doubt.
Devin, what's our next question?
I liked how you earlier you referenced like the spaces you're in, like the when you're recording music and and engaging in culture like that. So how would you? I think there's this balance, like as a Christian, where you walk in and you don't want to condone things, but you also want to speak truth.
Yeah.
And so how do you go about like sharing your faith like that, where you're going to an environment where people already know you as a Christian,
Yeah.
so their guards can be kind of up already. How do you deal with that?
Let me take this in two ways. And one, I'll leave at a 30,000 foot level. That's a question that people can ponder. And then one to me in those spaces. I think if proximity equals guilt, then Jesus is in a lot of trouble. Like, we'll leave it there. Do with that what you will. But Jesus holds proximity to people that, again, the religious elite are very upset he's around. And I don't think Jesus is there condoning. Like, I think there's a false dichotomy in proximity and condoning or saying something's okay. So I don't see it in Jesus. So when I'm in those spaces, when it comes to sharing faith, sometimes it is like very subtle and subdued. It's that lyric I pitched to that other artist. Like, it was a straight Hebrew 6 lyric, but that didn't turn into a gospel presentation. It was just in these little ways of faithfulness. It's like the Brother Lawrence line. It was washing the dishes in the hall. Like, it was holding the door open for somebody who was walking through.
Yeah.
So there's those little subtle moments where I don't think we have to make it any bigger than it is, where we represent the kingdom of God in small ways. I think about it, like, especially in the space that I'm in, that I really am intentional about writing lyrics of women who are heroes of mine, in a redemptive space that would, like, speak well of women. Like, in a time where there would be this really cool honoring of who God's made, and especially with male artists. So, like, I think it's subtle. You can see my faith and values in those ways. And then sometimes when the beat's not on for them, we'll go freestyling and we'll rap battle back and forth with each other, and I'll straight gospel drop on somebody. And I did one the other day. I said, I'm like St. John of the Cross walking on a dark night, soul light peeking through the fog like a Benz bright. I mean, we were just going back and forth with it. And St. John of the Cross, like dark night of the soul. So, like, I think it's all the different ways. It can be explicit gospel, Matt Chandler right up in somebody's whatever. And then there can just be the moments that it's kingdom ambassadorship where you're just holding the door.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Awesome.
I take it in everywhere in between.
Okay.
Yeah, personally.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
So cool. I think it's just crazy to see the different possibilities and how narrow-minded we sometimes think about what it means to share our faith.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, like, if we don't include Jesus and eternity and salvation and the words faith and grace,
Penal substitutionary atonement theory.
right? Exactly. Like, are we actually making a difference in someone's lives? But what's crazy is I've heard it said, like, it takes, I think it's seven
times.
Seven
Yes.
encounters.
Yes.
With Christianity,
Yes.
for someone to even contemplate actually giving their life over to it.
Yeah.
And so that sucks to be the sixth, right?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
so much more
So
the
close
fourth.
to the harvest.
Right.
Yeah.
But man, you don't get to that seventh moment of someone converting without those other 6 times of encountering a Christian that loved Jesus.
Yeah.
I remember one of my professors, first time I met him, we started talking about Jesus, and he said, I don't believe in Jesus. And one of the reasons I don't believe in Jesus is I've just encountered a lot of Christians, to be honest.
Totally.
He said, and they said their values were this, and they treated me very poorly.
Yeah.
And fast forward, I was in his classes for 3 years. We had ongoing conversations about all things. And at the end, when I graduated, he said, I just want you to know that you have removed that objection for me. So I think just, wow, he's definitely, I don't even know if he's saved now.
Right.
But I, as a person, simply by trying to follow the way of Jesus and be kind to him,
Yes.
nothing more, kind and respectful,
Right.
as a student, engaging in his classes,
Right.
I've removed one of his greatest barriers to becoming a
100%.
Christian. What if that's your part in the story?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I completely agree. Like, I heard somebody say one time that the world is good enough at telling everybody all the things they're not.
Right.
What if you were just known as the person who reminded people who they are?
Wow.
And that be the way. And, like, I think in this conversation of secular and sacred, it's important to note that I don't see that there's a difference. I think it's important to, like, I think a sacred secular divide is an illusion. I think it's false. I think all things done for the glory of God, for the people God made, with the gifts God has given, is sacred.
That's right.
No matter where it is. So, like, we have a plumber in our church at Folsom, and I asked him one time, I said, why do you love being a plumber? He looked me in my eyes and said, Oh, it's because plumbing, nothing ruins your peace of mind like bad plumbing. Amen? Like, he's like, nothing will ruin your peace of mind like that. My job on earth is to bring peace to other image bearers.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
the
what
clarity.
the heck am I doing here? That I shouldn't be preaching. I shouldn't be pastoring this church. Like, you get it.
Yeah.
You get it. Like, adding value, sacred. Like, in this idea of renewal. So I just like, whatever part you play in the puzzle, I think anything done for God, for the people God made, with the gifts God's given you, is sacred space.
Yeah.
That's so good.
That's great.
That's good ground.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's awesome.
Any more questions, Devin?
No.
No? Okay.
All right, then I got to bring one up.
I was going to give you kind of the last rights as where this conversation should go.
So I told you off air, there's this relationship in my life right now that I never saw coming that has been unbelievable. Like nothing that has happened in my life before. I have oddly become friends with the Muslim imam in Folsom. He is also my exact age.
Really?
Exact age.
You guys are both young to be doing what
he's
you're
actually
doing.
the youngest in his space I've ever met.
It's wild.
In my life to this point. And we've had some really real conversations of being like, all right, let's be 100% honest.
Is that like the head pastor of a Muslim community?
Yeah, at a mosque. So like I'm sitting there and I'm like, let's just be honest. I want you to meet Jesus.
Yeah.
And you wish I acknowledged the final prophet. Like, if we can just throw all this onto the table, every elephant in the room owned. Yeah. How's your wife? How are the kids? He's then introduced me to all these people in his community. And by all these, I mean probably 12 or 13 individuals that I've now got to have conversation and relationship with. He and I got to go hang out and have a conversation recently that was hard and amazing. And I cannot help but feel the sense that God has brought us together on purpose. Wow. Like, and intentionally. And back to Dina's other question, I do not care at all how it looks to me and that man sit at a tea shop together. I do not care how that looks. I much more care about the relationship, what it brings to me in the community, that I can be a representation to him of love and the gospel, that he then obviously feels all the same things about having a relationship with me.
Right.
And that we are having these really honest conversations about our dads, about where we grew up. He came from Detroit, so had a lot of hip-hop conversations. And I just think, like, my encouragement to anybody listening would be that you do not have to give up what you believe to be in spaces that you did not think you would be in, and in relationships you didn't see coming, and to prayerfully see the transformation that comes from those that you didn't think would happen. Yeah. And to, like, he has been so impactful. Like, he was giving me this thing that he had read to his kids. I'm about to be a dad. I've never been a dad before. He's a dad of many. And he sits there and tells me this book he's been reading, trying to teach his kids how to be kind to one another out of this understanding that they're serving each other. And I'm like, man, I'm going to get that book. I'm going to read that to my son. And it's just been an amazing thing. So I wouldn't close doors that God may be absolutely calling you to walk into for the sake of the kingdom of love.
I love that
That's
so
awesome.
much.
Yeah.
I have a final question for you, Brannon.
Yes.
And it's just, I feel like one of the things I appreciate about you is your clarity of belief. And for anyone that is like, man, I can't go out into all these conversations and have those conversations. I have nothing to say. I have nothing to offer. Give us some ways that we can think deeply about our faith and understand the story of Scripture, so that when we go into those spaces and we try to share the gospel of who Jesus is, we actually have something to say.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great question, because you're right. We only get to live the experience that we only get to live in our skin.
That's right.
One of the statements I use a lot is that I am stubbornly committed to this, that God is better than my thoughts of God are. That the best good I can think God is, that he is better still. that the most loving I think God is, he is more loving, more merciful, more compassionate. And God is better than my thoughts of God are. So to your point, as people are in their word and wrestling and grappling, I describe reading the Bible as swimming in the ocean. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Again, forgive my like poetic hip hop brain here, but that's the only way I can like when somebody asks, what's reading the Bible for you? I'm like, swimming in the ocean. Have you ever done it before? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, and you see these teeming little fish and coral and reefs. And all of a sudden, have you ever been in the ocean and you felt the temperature of the water change? Mm-hmm. And people are like, yes. I'm like, that only happens when the depth of the water changes. Mm-hmm. Like, do you ever sit in a passage that you've been in before and all of a sudden it feels like the water's changed because you're in deeper water than you thought you were the last time you read it? Like, the beauty in the space. The beauty and the fact that like I get to commune with God and pray, and I get to talk to God. I get to swim through his word and then live in his world. I think regardless, if you are approaching the text with the assumption of God's goodness and love, then as you then approach the world, you bring both of the things. Like, I think you're more tempted even to bring good and love when you're assuming that it's good and love. Yeah. So as you go out, if you're an introvert, if you've got all these different passions, if you're in all of these different spaces, it's what I said in episode 1 that we did together. The greatest thing you bring to any room is a transformed you. Mm-hmm. So there is no pressure to be me, and there's no pressure to be you. Of somebody else. Yeah. For them to be me or them to be you or them to be you. The faithful walk is for them to be them, transformed by a good and loving God and setting good and love on display in the ways that God, I think about that Philippians line, willing for you to want. Like at the very core of those places, doing it the way that he sets your soul aflame, like Friedrich Buechner, rest in peace, great author. He wrote on vocation and our like way that we operate in the world. He posed a question. He said, where does your deep longing and your deep gladness intersect with the world's hunger, is how he said it. But his point was, where do the things that make you come alive take the posture of a servant so that they can then meet others?
Wow.
Be you. What makes you come alive with the people God's put in your path for the good and love's sake?
There you go. That's where we have to end it, Brandon. It does not get better than that.
Mic drop.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super appreciate this conversation.
No doubt. Same.